Cyberpunk 2077 has a lot of side content to keep you busy for hours upon hours. One of said side content would be merc contracts, or rather gigs, the green icons on your map. These gigs are basically the equivalent to the Witcher contracts from The Witcher 3. Small jobs that you can do for some extra cash and experience, but nothing of any real value or importance. However, that doesn't mean that gigs are useless, boring, or tedious, even though many of them can be. Some gigs in Cyberpunk are actually really good and worth your while to do. Some of these gigs are actually some of my favorite content in the entire game. So I decided to play through every single gig on numerous different saves over the course of my entire total playtime of the game, all to compile a list of the top 10 best gigs in Cyberpunk. Make sure you leave a comment telling me your favorite gigs and why, but without wasting any more of your time, let's get into the top 10 best gigs in Cyberpunk 2077. Within the prestigious district of Westbrook, there is a gig called Olive Branch. Your job is to drive a car from point A to point B. The monkey's paw, however, is that you are transporting a Biotechnica suit. You can either drive the car or let him go. Either way, you get paid and successfully complete the gig. But what exactly is going on here? Well, this suit is a gift for the Tiger Claws. There is a scav named Sergey who royally pissed off the Tiger Claws. You see, he did something completely unforgivable. He killed a dog. The Tiger Claws have this well-dressed hitman, the suit and tie type, and he traveled around with a dog. But overall, he wasn't very breathtaking, according to Sergey. This gig is obviously just a reference to the John Wick movie starring Keanu Reeves. Now, Sergey doesn't explicitly say he killed his dog, but it is heavily implied. Go ahead and take a listen and decide for yourself.
How'd you piss off the Tiger Claws?
It was just a friendly misunderstanding.
Sure.
This man, he look normal, beard, brown shoes, nothing, breathtaking. And they also have little dog, Gospody. What kind of hitman goes around with dog?
This misunderstanding involved you shooting him?
It was worse, much worse. I say too much already.
The Phantom Liberty DLC added a total of 10 new gigs to the game. One of those gigs is called Road to Redemption. The interesting thing about the DLC gigs is that they are basically just side quests but in gig form. You end up meeting with a girl named Neil. She's a member of a terrorist group called the Crimson Harvest, who have a real hard-on for Biotechnica. But Neil doesn't agree with killing innocent people. So your job is to break into an old weapons factory in Dogtown and basically neutralize a bomb so the Crimson Harvest can't use it to bomb yet another Biotechnica building.
Did Hans bring you up to speed? Said you're a terrorist with a heart of gold. For the love of... We're not terrorists.
Now this quest is interesting in the way that I have absolutely no idea what this Neil is going on about. She aggressively agrees with the Crimson Harvest and claims not to agree with the acts of terrorism, but she's the one who did the last bombing. And plus, she's not discreet about the mission at all. She even gets both of you cornered by Biotechnica agents. At this point, you might as well just hand her over. This gig is honestly very entertaining with how nonsensical Neil really is. Plus, this is the only time you can get the Hercules 3AX, which is a very unique and overpowered smart gun and power gun hybrid. Once you finish all the gigs for a given district, you'll start to get a few gigs here and there from Rogue, Johnny's ex-girlfriend who didn't make the cut. One of those gigs is called Family Heirloom, and you have to help Nancy's son. You see, 6th Street has his Rayfield Caliburn and old samurai bootlegs, and you need to get them back. Not only does this gig pay very well, but it contains some funny banter with Johnny Silverhand, and I always love good Johnny Silverhand banter.
I remember that gig. Blew my vocal cords out so hard I couldn't speak for a week.
Wow, man. That must have been fun to watch.
What, the gig?
No, you're not speaking for an entire week.
Let's go ahead and take a trip out to the Badlands for another gig called Radar Love. Out in the Badlands, there is a new Militech outpost, along with a prototype radar truck that they are using to track the Aldecaldos. So, of course, we can't have any of that. All you have to do for this gig is enter the area and take the truck. It seems pretty bland when you think about it, but what I really love about this gig is how chaotic it is. There are so many Militech soldiers here, and with the way the outpost is laid out, most of the Militech enemies just gather in one spot. I just like to grab myself a smart weapon like Divided We Stand or Crime Stopper, and just unload on all of the enemies, and watch them explode into clouds of poison gas and electricity. This gig also pays out very well, but sometimes gigs aren't always about the money. Some gigs actually have a good story to them, including one of Padre's gigs called On a Tight Leash. A Valentino ended up killing a police officer, and the death was essentially covered up, so your job is to find out why the investigation was dropped. But you end up finding a bunch of Militech equipment inside of a Valentino haunt. Even Johnny Silverhand points out how the two don't match.
Can you spot the two things that don't match?
I give up.
Hint 1, Militech. Hint 2, Valentinos.
The thing is, you find out that Arasaka hired the Valentinos to raid an Arasaka facility using Militech equipment. Arasaka wants to go to war with Militech, even though they know they'll lose, which makes this sort of a mystery.
Joffrey's death was an accident. Jose was covered for another reason.
I'm still listening.
He and his crew were hired to launch a full-blown assault on an Arasaka facility, and to do it using Militech equipment.
Attacking Arasaka. On Arasaka's behalf. Shit. You need to get out of there.
You know more than you're telling. Spill.
I'm just speculating here, but
Out with it.
there's a good chance that Arasaka's looking to pick a serious fight with Militech.
This gig is very interesting in the way that it could possibly be foreshadowing at the future of the series. I could go down this huge rabbit hole about the future of the Cyberpunk game, but I'll just give you a quick rundown. In just about every ending of Cyberpunk, Arasaka ends up falling off the top of the pyramid, whether it's because you destroyed Arasaka or because Arasaka willingly pulled out of Night City. Regardless, it's stated numerous times throughout the game that Militech and Arasaka are at each other's throats, and if they went to war, Militech would easily win. In post-Cyberpunk 2077, Militech becomes the new top dog of Night City, and in the year 2079, during the epilogue of the tower ending, Night City is littered with Militech enlistment propaganda, and the city seems to be in some kind of military state. This, along with the information from On a Tight Leash, really makes you think about what the sequel could be. But enough of my conspiracy ramblings. One of the very first gigs in the entire game is called Monster Hunt. Your job is to capture, or preferably kill, a tiger claw named Jotaro Shobo. This man, if you could even call him that, is mentioned numerous times throughout the game. He's a pretty big player for the tiger claws. Early on, this gig can be very difficult because you have to kill quite a lot of tiger claws, and fight your way up like 4 or 5 floors. It's literally a gauntlet of tiger claws, and I do love a good combat-heavy mission, especially when your objective is to kill a person who actually deserves it. My favorite part of this mission is actually the access points. If you are doing a Netrunner build, Monster Hunt is your best friend. There are way too many access points here. You will be in this mission for like an hour. You can even save this gig for later in the game when you have a much better cyber deck, and you'll end up leaving the mission with more money than you know what to do with. Here is a picture of Rebecca. Now this next gig won't guarantee you very much money, but sometimes it's more about the journey rather than the destination, even though Johnny would disagree with me on that one. But the gig in Westbrook called Greed Never Pays is just that. Your job is to steal a skeleton key, or a corp cracker, which now that I say it sounds like a racial slur. But this borderline racist piece of technology allows corpos to get out of the corpo biz without losing their corpo cyberware. Now I'm not sure why anyone would get a job where you have to hand over your literal organs and body parts, but I guess the skeleton key will help with that. So you make your way into the Japantown apartments, and you'll need to find a secret room, which is just pushing this button. And reading the computer messages, you'll find out that the skeleton key was taken to an underground club. So you drive all the way across town and make your way down into the club, preferably guns blazing because stealth is for pansies, and you'll eventually find the skeleton key. Your character and Johnny will even make a crack at the adage of size doesn't matter. So you essentially went through this 15-minute wild goose chase just for a dick joke. Totally worth it, if you ask me.
Bingo. Come to mama.
Huh. And to think so many people died for this tiny little shit speck.
It's not the size that counts.
Both you and I know no one actually believes that.
One of the very few gigs in the luxurious city center is called a lack of empathy. The empathy club's old owner wants his club back, so you need to break in and install some malware. This is just a breaking and entering style gig, but we're not doing this gig for the lore. Ideally, and preferably, you need to sneak into the club and do not get spotted. However, stealth is totally optional. Usually I try to do stealth, but if I fail, I'll just go guns blazing. But with this gig specifically, I prefer to just go guns blazing. This whole gig reminds me of the one mission from Call of Duty Black Ops 2, where you get into a shootout inside the club's solar, which is probably the best mission out of the entire Call of Duty series. Obviously, this entry is heavily biased, but this is my list, so I think we can let a bias like that slide. Besides, listening to grumpy old boomer Dino complain about a job well done is totally worth it. There's a gig in Haywood called Psychofan, where you break into a samurai Psychofan's apartment and steal one of Kara Eurodyne's guitars. This gig is yet another generic breaking and entering gig, but the theme of samurai really makes it stand out. Assuming that you actually interact with the samurai memorabilia around the apartment, Johnny will reminisce about his days when he was just a rocker boy. Besides, you already know I love a good Johnny Silverhand banter.
Piss poor acoustics, that place. Lighting came a close second. Grub was the worst. Of course, the chicks made up for that. Best pussy I ever ate.
Now for the very best gig in the entire game, there's a very interesting and comical gig right outside the Dogtown gates called Waiting for Dodger. Now I've already covered this gig in my video covering 5 of the weirdest side quests in the entire game, even though it's not actually a side quest. I made an exception for it because it's just that good. Waiting for Dodger is just a side quest, plain and simple, but it is indeed still a gig, so obviously it makes the #1 spot. You meet with a woman named Stella inside of her car, and recline backwards for whatever reason, and she tells you that her fiance, who is a police officer, and his on-duty partner are essentially neck deep up a creek. But she didn't give any other details, so you literally have zero idea what you are walking into. Once you step inside the police station, you make your way down to the basement where you find Charlie with his face covered in blood. Either he went Jeffrey Dahmer on someone, or he tried to drink the forbidden ketchup. Luckily, it was the former, as you find a mutilated corpse on the table.
Who's your friend?
Oh, me? Just told you, I'm Bill.
Thanks, Bill, got that. No, I mean the dead f***ing body on the table you somehow failed to mention to Stella.
Charlie and Bill will explain that someone stole Dodger's drugs, Dodger being one of Hansen's goons. Charlie and Bill caught the guy, but they decided to return him to Dodger because they think they'll get paid. But the guy ate the drugs and died. So what do? They cut him open to get the drugs back, but the drugs were absorbed into his body. So they end up losing the drugs and killing the thief. So you see how this might be a problem. On your way out of the station, you get confronted by Dodger. He's actually a simple man. Just like the rest of us, he just wants to know what's going on.
Name's V. Got no clue what I'm doing here.
Now this whole ordeal was simply just a misunderstanding. If you tell him the truth and don't slaughter his men, everyone walks away unharmed. So the fact that Stella hired you only made things worse. Waiting for Dodger is easily the best gig and one of the best missions in the entire game. There you have it, that was the top 10 best gigs in Cyberpunk 2077. Let me know which gigs are your favorite and why down in the comments, and make sure you check out my memberships and see if that tickles your pickle. Anyways, I'll see you later, and remember not to take life so seriously.